What's going on, friends? The Harley-Davidson Sportster is an absolute legend when it comes to Harley-Davidson motorcycles. A lot of people love the Sportster, and for good reason. They're cheap, quick and easy to pick up, and they're absolutely everywhere. But when it comes to a Sportster, I hate to talk bad about them, but honestly, there are a few things about the Sportster that just no amount of money is going to overcome. Just about anybody that rides Harley-Davidson, they all have a Sportster story. Sportsters are absolutely wonderful motorcycles. They can do anything. You can make a Sportster anything you want to. Now, the biggest hang-up when it comes to the Sportster is that, well, we tend to put a lot more money into them than what they're worth. Well, that's any Harley-Davidson, for example. But when it comes to a Sportster, a lot of times, you could end up putting more money into that bike, and you could have just bought a Dyna, a Softail, or maybe even a touring bike. Now, as much as I love Sportsters personally, you can only put so much money into these bikes, and honestly, they're just not going to be cut out for the job that you may be trying to do with them, and that is for two reasons. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. I don't care what Harley-Davidson you ride, you cannot go wrong with investing in suspension. Now, granted, the lower price of the Sportster, if you put a high-dollar, high-end suspension on these motorcycles, they're going to ride like a dream, don't get me wrong. It's never money wasted. But when you're spending about as much on the suspension components as you did for the motorcycle, that's where we kind of start to run into trouble. And this brings me to my first point on the Sportster, is that the short wheelbase. No matter what suspension you put under that motorcycle, you can dump all the money in the world into suspension on a Sportster. You just can't overcome the short wheelbase. Great for turning, great for handling. It's exactly what the Sportster is designed to do. That's hence the short wheelbase. Now, if you're wanting to ride two up or you're wanting to tour on this bike, the short wheelbase, you're going to notice it when you've been on this bike for a couple hundred miles running straight down the highway. Being a short wheelbase bike, they are a little bouncy on the highway, kind of that rocking back and forth motion. Now, high dollar suspension does help with that, but it's not going to completely overcome it. It's never going to ride as smooth as a Dyna, for example, being the next model family up. Now, as many of you know, Sportsters, they are smaller frame motorcycles, and we always say that, hell, anybody can ride a Sportster if they absolutely want to, which is true. But how much money do you want to put into this? You got to figure to get a seat that sets you back farther, up higher, you're looking at $500 for a really good seat. You don't want to buy the cheap Chinese ones. They work for a while, but they're never going to be as good as an expensive name brand seat. Then you got bars. Then you've got triple clamps. You got risers. And what's that going to cost you? You're looking at another $500 there when you include the bars, the hardware, and the cables. Then there's the extended forward controls if you're tall as well. You're going to have to move those controls forward. And if you're trying to ride two up, you still have that shorter wheelbase, smaller frame. So you and your passenger are both going to be bunched up on that bike. So Sportsters, yes, you can make them touring bikes. They're excellent motorcycles for doing so, but they're not the best bikes for extended stay riding. When you're going to be on it for days and miles going down the highway, you're definitely going to want to look into something bigger. And that is the first thing that no amount of money is going to overcome. We can't overcome the short wheelbase and the smaller frame when it comes to wanting to spend some really heavy miles on this bike day after day. Now, one of the best attributes of the Sportster, I have to say, is got to be the Evolution engine. That is probably the absolute best engine that Harley-Davidson ever produced, and it's a shame they didn't take that same architecture and just basically scale it up into a big twin. Don't get me wrong, the Big Twin Evo was an excellent engine, but it never was quite as good as the Sportster's Evolution engine. But the issue with the Sportster's Evolution engine is that, yes, these motors will make big horsepower. They will make a lot of power. But the one thing that they lack is torque. Yes, we could put the bore into these engines, but the one thing that we really can't overcome is the stroke. We can only put so big of a crank in these engines, but they will never have the torque that the big twin engines have. They'll make the horsepower. They're easy to make, well over 100 horsepower very reliably. But when it comes to torque, you're not really going to get over 100 foot-pounds of torque out of these engines. It's absolutely possible, but at that point, you're really looking at basically a full-on race motor. It's something that you want to take to the track, or you wouldn't want to ride too far from home. It's just something you want to do stoplight to stoplight with. You got to think, when you have that high of a performance engine, especially in a smaller motor that you're having to rev really hard and really high, can you live with that every day, especially if you want to take long trips on these motorcycles? That is one of the biggest benefits that the Big Twin has over the Sportster engine, is that it can make big torque, and it can do it down low, low RPMs, and it can do it very lazily. Now, when it comes to the Sportster's Evolution engine, sure, it can make that big torque and it can make that big horsepower, but you got to look at the RPMs that you're going to have to turn on these engines to really get up there. We're talking 4,500 to upwards of 7,000 RPMs to really get that horsepower and torque out of these, which the bigger engines make just so lazily running down the road. Sure, we could take a Sportster, we can make it an 88 or even a 90 inch, but we're talking case boring, we're talking cranks, we're talking all kinds of special made items for these bikes. And at that point, I would have to argue that reliability would suffer for day-to-day riding. Is it great for the track? Absolutely. Is it great for a bar hopper? You bet. But for the day-to-day riding, I don't think I can live with that personally myself, especially if I was looking at taking long trips on these bikes. That is where the Sportster is going to fall short in the engine department as well. Now, there's a tool for every job in the Harley-Davidson toolbox, and the Sportster checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people, and you could do a lot with one of these. But at the end of the day, you can really end up putting more money into a Sportster than the motorcycle is absolutely worth. Now, that is true with any Harley-Davidson, and it's very easy to do with any Harley, but on a Sportster, for as little as they cost to obtain used, you're really looking at, you're going to come to a point where you're going to say, man, I should have bought a Dyna, or I should have got the touring bike, or maybe even a Softail. So if you're considering Sportsters, just be aware of that right there. But the main thing to be aware of on a Sportster is you're just going to get to a point where no amount of money you could throw at it is going to change what the bike really is designed to do. And it's a Sportster. It's designed to be sporty. It's designed to be a bar hopper. It's designed to put a lot of horsepower in and be able to ride around town and enjoy it. Not the best touring bikes, not the best long-term, long-haul bikes, if that's what you're looking to do, especially if you want to ride two up. We can't overcome the engine, and we can't overcome the shorter, smaller frame with that tiny wheelbase. Now, guys, I hate to talk bad about Sportsters, but I like to be real when it comes to Harley-Davidson motorcycles, especially on this channel. I'm an avid Sportster rider myself. I have a Sportster. I absolutely love it, and I find myself riding that bike more than any other one I own, from the V-Rod to my Dyna. The Sportster is usually my go-to, but if I'm going to take a long trip or something, I prefer to crawl on the Dyna myself. So guys, before I close this video out today, I really want to apologize that I took a 3-week hiatus. I know I promised a video last week, fell a little short, had some more family things come up. It's been a lot to take care of, but I just want to say I'm glad to be back, and I really appreciate everybody that stuck with me through this really challenging time in my life. As I mentioned in my community post, I had a death in the family, and it's been a lot for me to keep up with and try and arrange, and a lot of things to take care of, and something had to give, and unfortunately, I had to kind of take a little hiatus from YouTube for a bit, but it's good to be back. I appreciate everybody, and thank you so much for sticking with me, and I'm going to get back on my regular upload schedule from here forward. Guys, please don't forget, if you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to hit that like button, and consider subscribing to the channel. But anyhow, guys, that's all I've got for you this week. I appreciate you sticking around and taking time to watch the video today. But till next week, guys, you stay safe on the streets, ride smart, dodge those cars, and I'll catch you guys back here next week with a brand new video. Thanks for watching.